Hello. I'm being asked to um, make sure that I can. Okay, I can share everything here. All right. I'm being asked to record a piece to get you started. People are saying, what can we do to get started? And let me go ahead and give you some things where you can get started and some stuff to do some reading. In general, database books start off where I'm not real happy where they start with, and I always start with creating tables. Now, if you create tables, you'll find that up about chapter 7 of the textbook. So I'm going to start in chapter 7. We're going to go up and we're going to do enough of chapter 7 to get us caught up and get us where we can go with it, and where we can where the rest of the book starts making sense. And what we're going to do in databases, we're going to create tables. Now, the big thing in a table is a table is like a file to a database. So a table, think of a table as an index, Rolodex, and it has all of these cards in it. And so a table is an organized array of data, and think of these data as stored on cards. The cards aren't in any particular order. They're in whatever order you want to see them in. The cards, the information that is on the cards, it doesn't come in any particular order. It's just on there. If you sort the cards differently, everything gets sorted, so it all has to stay together. What else? We will access the data only by the content of the card. So I'll never say, give me the third card, although I can say, give me the top 10 cards. I'm going to say only, I'm only going to say, give me the cards where the city is Frisco, or something like that. And so we'll create this guy. So we're going to create this first. Basically, I'm going to go through this kind of fast, because I'm going to go back over this again in more detail. And I'm going to take about an hour. Basically, I'm just kind of trying to get you started here on something to get your stuff tested and let you start doing some SQL. So I'm going to put this out on YouTube for you. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up my database. Let me share my screen. Share. Okay. And now I should be sharing, and close him down. Okay. And first thing I want to do is I go to my programs, and we'll go down to the Microsoft SQL Server 2017, and make sure. 2017, I'm looking for my 2017 tools. Okay, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, that's 2018. I guess we installed one that was a little bit later. That's fine. So this is the one I'm really going to be using. This is the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And it would probably be a good idea if you would right-click this guy, right-click him, and put him down on your start menu, because he's going to come in real handy to have down here. And he's still up here. We just made a copy of him. So I'm going to open him. And it takes him a minute. He doesn't open really, really quickly. I'm about to make a mistake here just to show you a common mistake. So here he is up, and it's asking us to connect to a server. So we're going to connect to SQL Express. That's the name of our server. And since we have created a user, we're going to connect using Windows authentication. My username that I created is SW Smith. Your username that you created is probably different, and your password. Okay. Remember, the password is easy because I wouldn't do that on a real system, but connect. And so what happens? Wait a minute, we're just sitting here. Something is wrong. Okay. And we'll wait and we'll wait and we'll wait. And okay, hurry up and make a, it's hung. In other words, if it doesn't go right away, it's not going to go. I'm waiting for it to give me an error message. It needs a hurry up button on it. Okay, if you're still sitting here, if it doesn't go right away, there we go. Network instance error occurred while the server was not found or was not accessible. This is real common. Whenever you see that, cancel out of it. Go to your services. So how did we get there? You can get there by going to all the way down to Windows Administrative Tools and find services, or if you're like me, you put it on the desktop, or put it in your start menu, and then you go to your services, SQL Server Express. Notice it is not running. I forgot to start my server. So it's kind of like jumping in my car and taking off and forgetting to start the engine. And I just say start. It doesn't take it long. Now I'm pretty much done with this. I'm going to be done here until I turn it off. When I'm done, I'm going to turn it off. And now when I do my connect to the database engine, connect with server authentication, I'm going to put in my username SW Smith. And I believe it'll keep my password. It didn't, but I'm going to tell it to remember again. When I say connect now, bingo, it connected very, very quickly. Okay, no waltz me around the parlor stuff with it. So I'm going to now, I will go up here to new query. And so right here at the top, new query, I can say Control N, new query. I open this. This is our window. So here is our programming window. So this is where we will mostly be doing our programming in this class. Most of what we do will be here. You can edit in this window. You can type into this window. You can copy and paste into the window. It's much nicer than the Oracle version. And I'm going to be telling you to do some things that you don't really have to do in SQL Server, but we're going to do them anyway because it's a good practice to get into. Excuse me. Now, I already have one of my files out here. So I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'll send you this file. We don't need to change that. Okay. First thing is that if I do the control and roll the mouse, it'll increase the font. Other thing is I don't really need this open. I can always bring it back again if I want it. So I'll go ahead and close it. If I need to bring it back again, I simply go to the View, Object Explorer, and it comes back. It's just taking up real estate right now, and I don't really need it open. So on this one, I want you to use the ScratchDB. The first thing the first piece of a program is always your name. Now, the other thing is that I haven't told you yet, but I'm about to here, is it's nice to turn on your line numbers. And let me see if I can remember how to get to those. I go to Tools, and I go to Options, I believe, Options. And then I go down to Text Editor. And Text Editor, I drop down and I go to All Languages. And then I go to General. And then I come over here, and I click line numbers. Now, how do I do that? Let's go through it again. I go to Tools, Options, Environment, Text Editor, All Languages, General, click line numbers. Now I have the line numbers. So when it's referring to like line number 4, error at line number 4, I'll at least know where it is without having to count to it. And I'll talk about some other little things about this. Okay. Use the ScratchDB. And one good thing is that I can execute this in pieces. Now, if I just execute this, I highlight this and execute it. It says commands completed successfully. I always need to execute the use first. To close this half of the window, it is Control R, and that blows that half of the window off. I did Control R to get this. Okay, now I'm about to create a table here. So let's take a look at the table. I'm saying create table, doctors. Where will I create the table? I will create the table in the database called ScratchDB. The table, think of the table as a Rolodex. On the Rolodex card are several fields: a social security number for the doctor, a name, a street, a city, a state, a phone number. Okay, all of these are character data. If it is char 9, that says it takes up 9 characters. If it says varchar, that means it takes up 16 characters maximum. I usually tend to make things just char because I don't really save much if it's a small field. If it's something like 500 characters, then it's going to save me something doing varchar. We're going to talk more about that. So char is a fixed length field up to 9 characters. Varchar is a variable length field up to 16 characters, and I'll just leave it at that. A constraint. Every table has a primary key. A primary key is required to be a valid table. A primary key cannot be null. In other words, it cannot be an empty field, and it must be unique. So the primary key will always identify at most one record in the table. They cannot have duplicates. Now, I know I'm playing kind of fast with this. Just go with me. The constraint null name, I say check that the name is not null. These constraints are named. There's the name of the constraint is doctors PK. When I violate that primary key, either accidentally leave it null, the SSN null, or I have duplicate SSN, I will see this as part of the error message. So you always have named constraints. You will see some books will do this differently. They will just say DSSN space primary key, comma, and it works, but my way's better. So this table has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields, and a constraint that says primary key, and another constraint called null dname. It says check that the dname, the second field, is not null, meaning, well, it has to have a name. I'm not going to let you in the table if you don't have a name. So you have to have an SSN. You have to have a name to be in my table. And since I have already executed the use ScratchDB, I can now just highlight this, the create table part, and execute it. Notice I got that it was completed successfully. Now that table exists. By the way, I can go back over here if I want to go back to my Object Explorer and go to Databases and go to Scratch. Note under Tables, now I find my table right there. We won't use that much. That's this guy does have, I'm going to do Control R to bring it back. We do have a graphical user interface just like Access, but we're not going to use it much. This class is about using SQL. It's not about using the graphical user interface, but we can use it when we want to. You just have to do it in SQL. So we've created the table, and it does. Now, what would happen if I tried to create it again? I'm going to execute, and notice I got an error message here because it says there is already an object named doctors in the database. And I say, oops, okay. So therefore, whenever we have a, whenever we're creating tables, I'm going to have this if object ID doctors, notice the single quotes, just copy it, do it like this. If object ID doctors is not null, in other words, if that name exists, drop the table doctors. Okay, get rid of it. So now if I execute both of these guys together, whether he exists or not doesn't matter, because if he does exist, he's going to drop him. And if he does not exist, well, he'll create him. So he drops him if he exists, then he creates him. Other databases will have a slight change. This is not, by the way, lines 9 and 10 are not SQL. Lines 9 and 10 are not SQL. They are part of the what we call a wrapper language that is called TSQL, and that's what the second class is about. Second class will be available next semester. Anybody interested in signing up for it, you sign up for ITSE 2347. It's about all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Doctors. Now, tell me about a doctor. A doctor has patients. How many patients does a doctor have? Well, a doctor has 0 or more patients, an infinite number, maybe. Nothing's infinite, but 0 or more. So how can I represent this? Well, the way we represent it in database, and I'm going to go a lot more slowly through this in the next lecture, the way we represent it in database is with what we call a foreign key. A foreign key is where the primary key of the parent, so the doctor's is a parent, and he or she has many, meaning 0 or more children. So the foreign key of the parent table goes over to the child table, and it becomes what we call a the primary key of the parent goes over to the child table. So the child table is the patient's table, and I'm going to copy and paste. By the way, this is a comment. So if you have 2 dashes, dash, dash, that's a comment. And lots of times we'll use just a line of them across to separate stuff. So that's just a comment. Where else? Here's another comment. By the way, this also works as, do I have any multi-line comments? This one also works. That opens the comment. That closes the comment. We usually use this one and then this one when I want to comment out a bunch of stuff. So that's the C version of the comment, okay? Paste this in there, create the table patient. A patient has a PSSN. It has a name, it has a street address, it has a state, a city, excuse me, a state. And then here, notice that everything, patients is the P table, and notice that I have chosen to name all of my fields with a P underscore. I prepended a P to them. That way I can just look at that table, at that field name, and I can tell you what table it comes from. This is a good programming practice. You are not required to do that. By the way, you can notice all these doctor table, everything up here is D. P. Oh, what do we have here? Oh, look at this. We have one that does not agree with that, DSSN, and I have it labeled here. It says foreign key. Foreign key means it takes me to another table. So when I find a DSSN there, it is the, it is the primary key of another table. So if I find a 456 in here, that takes me to the doctor, who is Dr. 456. Up here, I can find that doctor's name, street, city, state, phone. So I can have 10 or 15 different patients that all have the same doctor. A doctor can have 0 or more patients without doing any duplicating, and that's the idea here, and this is what we mean when we say a relational database. I know I'm playing very fast with this. I'm just trying to get through some stuff here just to get you guys started. Just, you know, you can listen to as much of it as you want to. I'm not going to require you because the class hasn't started yet. It is good practice not to have a completely empty line. SQL Server won't mind, but other databases will. So if you want to skip a line, put a comment on that line, a dash dash. It has a constraint, patient's PK, primary key is the PSSN. It has another constraint, patient's doctor's FK, foreign key, DSSN, this one. References doctor's DSSN, this one. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have one. Now, the primary key, everybody has to have one. Everybody in the patient's table has to have a PSSN, but you don't have to have a DSSN. The DSSN can be null. If it's null, it's just null. Doesn't hurt anything particularly. I mean, it might, but it doesn't hurt the database. Well, all I'm saying is that if you have a DSSN, then that DSSN has to be in the parent table. So I'm not saying that you have to have a parent. You might be an orphan. If you are an orphan, that's fine. You just have a null parent. But if you have a parent, then that parent has to be in the parent table. You can't have an invalid parent. Okay. And we'll talk a lot more about this. Talk about one other one that is not SQL. There's this go command, go. Anytime you have a create statement, create anything. Listen carefully to me here, please, because I would like for you to get this. If you don't get anything else out of this little piece I'm recording right now, just get this part. Go. Before you say create anything, and we're going to create other stuff besides tables, but right now it's just tables. Go. Now, if you're not creating, you don't have to worry about it. What Go does, it says, okay, make all of this stuff happen. Make all of this happen. And then this is a different program. So it says, okay, in this batch, start a new program, create the table. In this batch, start a new program, create the next table. And since we're done, we don't have to have a go, but I typically, because I'm famous for putting in other stuff behind it. And so we put the go. Notice that all of the SQL commands use scratch. Notice this ends in a semicolon, ends in a semicolon, ends in a semicolon. Go is not an SQL command. This isn't really an SQL command, but it's a TSQL command, so it ends with a semicolon. Go, we don't care. If you put a semicolon after it, if you just like putting semicolons after stuff and you want to put a semicolon after it, you may go ahead and put a semicolon after it. I typically don't. It's a separator, and it says, okay, make all of this stuff happen, and then do this, okay? I have to create the doctor's table first because we've answered the age-old question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. The chicken comes first. Okay, database has answered that. You have to have the parent before you can have the child. So the doctors, the parent has to happen first. If the child happened first, then this foreign key would be invalid, and we can't have an invalid foreign key. When we drop the table, we have to drop the child first. Because if we dropped the parent first, then the child would have an invalid reference. So it's we kind of have a rather macabre saying you have to kill the children first, then you kill the parent. You drop the child table first. We drop the patient table first because the patient table is the one that has the foreign key. And if you followed anything I've said tonight, you're probably doing a lot better than I. Anyway, I'm going to send this to you. I'll send you this file. And everything's fine here. Okay, so I'm ready. I'm going to execute it. Bingo. Notice he executed successfully. If I execute him again, he'll execute successfully. If I want to change something about the table, if this is too small and I want to raise it up to a varchar 10, that's fine. I'll make it a varchar 10. If I do that, I'll need to make it a 10 down here because they have to match. If I decide I need some more stuff for the patient's name, if 16 isn't enough and that needs to go up to 32, not a problem. Just push it up to 32, execute the code again. Okay, common mistakes are to accidentally have something highlighted like that, and then when you say execute, it's just going to try to execute that P, and it says, I don't know what P is. So don't have anything highlighted and just say execute. It's going to execute everything. If you just highlight a piece of it, then it'll only execute that piece. But the first thing you execute needs to be use scratch DB. Now you can go ahead and do the rest of it. What else are we going to do today? Control R. Close that guy down. You can drive around in here. If you trash your tables, you just trash them. You have it's okay for you to look at your tables let's see, if you go to your View, Object Explorer, and now you can go over here, and this is just a graphical user interface. And under databases, I can find my AP database here, and I can look at my tables. And there they all are. You're welcome to go look at them. ScratchDB. There's a cat asleep on my lap, and it's snoring. Tables. Here's doctor's table. And if I drop him down, I should have patients in here someplace. Columns, and there's the, okay, so where's my patients table? Sometimes you have to close him down and refresh him, then open him, open databases, open Scratch, open tables. Yeah, there. I just, the graphical user interface, sometimes you have to close it and reopen it again, because the graphical user interface and the engine are two different creatures. Now, when I'm ready to quit, I'm ready to go on. And next one, we'll talk about putting some stuff in there. If you if you read the creating the tables, you can also read about inserting rows into the tables. That's what we're going to do next, but we're not going to do that tonight. Have I covered everything that I just absolutely have to? I'm going to send you this file. This file is a text file, so you can copy in. Let me make a mistake here. I made a mistake. Undo. Where is that? Oh, here. Okay, if I just type something that's nonsense, it underlines it. Don't pay too much attention to that red squiggly line. Sometimes it's right and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it'll swear to you that it's an error and you execute it and it's not an error. There's nothing wrong with it. So just because you get a red line error does not mean that you have an error. I don't know, it's a pretty good bet. It's better than 50-50, but so if I go execute now, boom, I get an error message. Well, execute error message, because I don't know what XXX is, line 4, and I can go here see it. So I go to line 4 and it says, I don't know what that is. The SQL server does not care whether you put here's one. I want you to listen to this. SQL server does not care whether you have a semicolon or not. I do. The reason I care is because SQL statements end with semicolons. This is an SQL statement. Well, it's not really one, but we're going to treat it as one. It ends in a semicolon. This is a SQL statement right here. Line 17 through 27 is an SQL statement. It ends in a semicolon. There are no completely empty lines inside of an SQL statement. SQL Server doesn't care about that. I do. And the statement ends in a semicolon. If you don't put a semicolon there, it'll run just fine. You say execute, everything's fine. But I'll get even if you do. Okay, so put semicolons. Just get used to it. Just put a semicolon. Keep your teacher happy. Happy teachers. That's what you want. Line 40, for example, is an empty line, but I don't like empty lines inside of an SQL statement. After that, if you want to put empty lines here, well, more power to you. I don't think it's a good idea to have a whole lot of empty real estate, but whatever you want. Just not inside of a statement. If you're inside of a statement, put a comment on the line. All right, and here we are executing just to make sure everything's fine. And now I'm ready to save him, so I can just go save. And where will I put him? I guess I'll put him in Documents, Collin College 2309, and I'll put him in the summer 2019. I'll create me a folder. I'll name the folder, something really good here. Like, I don't know what I would name it. Maybe, how about SQL files? Okay. open here. What will I call this? This file is going to end in SQL. It is best if you do not have spaces in your file names. SQL sometimes doesn't like it. I don't know whether it bothers this one or not, but some of them it bothers. I'm going to call this one demo1. demo1.sql. Save. And I'm going to send you this file in the email. Okay. Now I'm ready to close him. Close him. He's gone. If I go to the file, and let's see, if I go to the Object Explorer, let's see, where is it? Boom. There's a where is it here? I think it's right here. Okay, if I go to the, here's the, see, SQL Express right here. If I right click this guy, right click up here, and I go down to stop, I can stop the server. Now, once I stop the server from here, I can't start him from here because I'm no longer connected. I have to be connected before I can start. So I'm going to have to start over here. I can stop him here, but I'm going to only go one way here. I'm going to say go back here, go down to SQL server, SQL server, running, double click him, stop. That way you don't have to remember two ways to do it. So just start him and stop him there. Now we're ready. We've turned off our SQL engine. This guy's still running, but this is just the graphical user interface. You can just shut him down. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'll send this out to you in an email with the file.